Good morning. I don't know if all of you saw my presentation last month, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I did that already last month, so hopefully you saw it, but I'm just going to give a quick update on where we are on a lot of these items. So I talked a lot about a quick wash nutrient removal technology and how we're moving forward with a pilot project in our area. Again, this is just the graphic that shows how the process works. We're acidifying the manure, and that basically by doing that, we're putting all the phosphorus into solution. We're taking the phosphorus out of the solid portion and putting it into the liquid portion of the manure. And then from there, we're using a dewatering machine. In this case, we're going to be looking at several different options for dewatering, a Fournier press out of Canada and a prime solution press out of Michigan. And then after that process, so we remove all the solids, which are virtually phosphorus free, so it just contains organic matter and a few other minor nutrients that can be disposed of properly on the farm, or if there's a market value, we would look at those options as well. And then we're adding lime back into that water portion, and from there we're able to precipitate out calcium phosphate. So I've been working with a company. I sent them a dairy sample, a swine sample, and they have been lab testing this over the last couple of weeks and to see how efficient they can be on the removal. And right now, or with the lab samples we sent, we're getting about 75 to 80% of the phosphorus out as calcium phosphate. So pretty good. We think we can do even better in the field. So the plan is to bring this here for a few weeks this summer. So as far as the schedule goes, we're going to do two separate pilots, a mini pilot, which is going to just demonstrate that dewatering section. So we're going to look at those several different companies and see which one's most efficient and most cost effective. And then we're going to do the full-scale pilot. So they'll be here for about 2 weeks to do that full-scale pilot. They're supposed to get me a formal proposal next week so I can start raising these funds to fund that full-scale pilot. They've told me around $15,000, and I think we can do that. And then hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have a firm date. It's just coordinating with those two companies with the dewatering machines to get them here at the same time. I mentioned Fournier Industries and Prime Solution. They're using what they call a Rotary Press. It's a fairly new technology, but it seems to be very successful in dewatering. They're using these at a lot of wastewater treatment plants to dewater their sludge. So they're going from a 90 to 95% moisture material and bringing that down to about a 70% moisture material, which is truckable and stackable, which is where we need to be. I also mentioned last month about doing a pilot with Trident Processes. This is the company that's dewatering all the manure at Fair Oaks Dairy in Indiana. I'm currently working on a grant application, and I just spoke with their consultant yesterday, and he's supposed to be getting a budget to me here within the next week so we can get that whole proposal together. So I may be asking for letters of support on that, assuming we get everything together in time. Livestock water recycling. It's just another technology out there to treat manure and dewater it. There's a swine farm in Orleans, Indiana. It's about 4 hours from here. I'm planning a visit. That system's supposed to be operational this month. So early to mid-June is what we're looking at as a time frame to go down there. So they're taking their swine solids that they put through this livestock water recycling system. And then they're taking their turkey manure as well and putting it through Coltex gasifier. And they're creating biochar. So they reduce the volume by 75% once they put it into the gasifier. And what a gasifier is, you're putting that manure into a completely oxygen-free environment, and you're heating it to a very high temperature. And you're creating biochar, which is a very high nutrient ash-like material. I also mentioned pit additives. Still working on several trials with pit additives. One of the swine producers that was using a product called Instagrow applied his manure, I want to say a few weeks ago. He took like 7 or 8 samples to the lab, and hopefully we'll be getting results on those samples But the real data will come in this fall when we look at the yields in the field and see what kind of changes and differences we have. I mentioned saturated buffer research with Wright State. We formally got the approval to go ahead with this project. Wright State's got a $80,000 grant to research this practice over the next 2 years. I'll be assisting with that. And it's going to be a great set of data to collect because this practice is new and this is the only one in the state of Ohio, and it's here in northern Mercer County. And if we can prove that this works and we are seeing significant edge of field reductions on nutrients, it could be replicated easily, and it's a fairly cheap practice, which is great along the stream sides here in Grand Lake. I also mentioned TYO Bioreactor. We had one of these installed here in the watershed at the St. Charles Seminary Farm in 2013. I was able to get Dr. Larry Brown here several weeks ago, and he wants to flush the system before we start collecting data. I haven't had as much luck in getting him back. He's a hard man to get a hold of. So I was actually laying in bed this morning at 5 a.m., couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about other options on if I can't get a hold of him. I want to do some testing on this and get some results out of it. So I have some ideas, and maybe we can move forward if I don't hear back from him in the near future. Tom mentioned this habitat monitoring we want to do in the feeder creeks. So back in 1999, the TMDL study was done for the Wabash watershed, and at that time they also collected habitat data for Grand Lake watershed, because really the Grand Lake is the Wabash watershed as well. So in 1999, I don't know if you all remember, but it was a drought year, and a lot of people questioned the data that they had collected that year because there was virtually no water in the streams. So how can we evaluate the bugs and the fish when there's no water moving through the streams? They are slated to be back in 2022 to do another study. So we suggested in the meantime, why don't we work with Wright State, who Dr. Stephen Jackman, he's a biologist, he's got a wealth of knowledge on fish and bugs, and he can work with some of his students to evaluate in the meantime what's going on in these streams. So like Tom said, we looked at several sites. We've got two, one on Chickasaw Creek, one on Beaver Creek, that are guaranteed access. We've already got permission from those landowners. So I'll be working on another 4 landowners to try to get permission to access some of their land and look at the creeks. And hopefully we can do that this summer yet. I've also mentioned 9-element watershed plans. We have both of our plans, one for Beaver Creek, one for Chickasaw Creek, at US EPA. We're just simply waiting on the comments from them to see what kind of changes we might have to make before we get our final blessing. These plans include several projects that could be implemented in the watershed to help improve water quality. Also wanted to mention, I have Ag Solutions meetings quarterly. The next one we are planning for July 10th of this year. Dr. Stephen Jackman, I've also been working with him on evaluating the Chickasaw Creek monitoring data that Heidelberg's been collecting for the last 10 years. And he's developing some trends. He's doing an in-depth analysis of what's happening. And on that date, we hope to have all that data completed, and he's going to present that. I also have Mr. Victor Van Slyke from ATD Waste Systems out of Canada. It's just another technology to treat and dewater manure. He's going to be talking about his system. And hopefully we'll have some updates on the pilots. And that'll be our last meeting until probably December with harvest, and I'm going to be on maternity leave there in the fall. So is there any comments or questions? If not, thank you very much.